Every night at around this time, we bring our experts to answer our viewers' questions, our questions. And tonight, Dr. Larry Schlesinger, the president and CEO of Texas Biomedical Research Institute, joins us. And we appreciate you being here with us, Doctor. And, you know, there's so much information that's out there, and that's kind of one of the reasons we do this coronavirus Q&A is to separate the facts from the fear and all that's out there. What should people be looking for between now and the time we actually have a vaccine that's ready to go to market? I mean, it's kind of like we're going to hear about so-called medical breakthroughs. I'll put that in quotations. What should people be wary of as they hear about all this?
Right. I think that's a great question, and it's good to be with you this evening. I have been through several infectious disease outbreaks in my career over 30 years as an infectious disease specialist and researcher in infectious diseases. And there are a couple of distinguishing features to this pandemic that are worth highlighting. The 24/7 news cycle is rapid firing, producing information to the public nonstop, and we're kind of glued to our phones and our televisions and hearing about all this news. And mixed with that, science discoveries, politics, views and opinions. There's also this entity called bioarchives, which has been around since around 2013, which is a public repository where if you're writing a paper, you can deposit it there and have it in the public view even before it's been so-called peer-reviewed, which is the time-honored approach to really looking at the science that makes a difference. So we're getting deluged with information. And I think we're really getting tidbits, little pieces and parts that are then talked about excessively in the public arena. And they're factoids. They're not really vetted facts. We're hearing information from companies. So I think it's very difficult. We get fatigued. And my biggest concern is that the public will get disappointed when they hear about something so promising and the next day there's a problem. So I think we need to be patient. We need to look at publications that have been thoroughly vetted in quality journals that are reported upon. Need to talk to experts like myself in venues such as this one. And we need to be patient. We need to understand that science does take time. It's a lot of trial and error. We know as scientists there's more failure than success. And we really do need to work night and day to get to things like drugs or vaccines that really are effective to a large audience. So patience, knowledge, and a careful eye towards these rapid fire news stories.
Yeah, let's get to some of our viewer questions that they have for you tonight, Doctor. The first one, sure. How long does it usually take to develop a vaccine?
Well, the quickest one we've developed historically is about 4 years. And typically you're talking about 10 to 20 years. At Texas Biomed, we were very involved in the development of the Ebola vaccine, the lead of which has been used in the Congo recently, a success story there with the outbreak being mostly halted. And that was work we were involved with a company for over a decade. And that was already pretty quick. So the idea that we have a fully researched vaccine that's gone through clinical trials, that's been manufactured, that works in the majority of people. And remember, for COVID-19, we're talking about everyone on the planet is susceptible. So you're talking about giving the vaccine to different age ranges, to people who might have other diseases. The idea that we'll be there by the end of the year, to me, is you know, I hold hope, but I think it's very unlikely. I think there's going to be some forks in the road. There's going to be some slowdowns, and it's going to take longer. So I think we can move faster than we have historically, just by the nature of these groups coming together, Operation Warp Speed and others. But I think it's going to take longer than people think.
My 6 o'clock co-anchor, Isis Romero, had a question that she was going to ask you at 6 o'clock is, even once we get the vaccine that seemingly works, you're talking about a massive undertaking when you're talking basically every country in the world, everybody in the world wants one of these vaccines. How is that going to be mass produced?
Right. I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult. One of the answers that you hear is that we'll produce more than one vaccine, and we may find out that we need several vaccines that target different populations. There's also the issue that there's a race to vaccine, and we have different countries participating. And so there's a question about, who gets, the first vaccine. Is it in the country of discovery, or is it going to be broadly distributed? Which companies will partner to effectively make the vaccine? I think these are really serious questions. I mean, we talk about the number of vials. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and we don't know how many doses in a given individual will be necessary to have a sustained response to the vaccine. So these are clearly questions, challenges that we'll face.
All right, I want to get through as many viewer questions as we can. And, I always call the San Antonio biomedical, biotech industry one of the best kept secrets. I mean, it's a huge success story. The next question is, how is San Antonio playing a role in developing a vaccine? And once we have a vaccine, will San Antonio play a role in testing it?
Right. So I'll speak about Texas Biomedical Research Institute because I think we have over decades actually played major role in vaccine development for Ebola vaccine. We were very involved in the hepatitis B vaccine and hepatitis therapy studies, working with the private sector and the FDA, and we have a lot of experience. Right now, we are completing a major study in which we tested several of our primate species at the Southwest National Primate Research Center at Texas Biomed. And we have some very promising results that you'll be hearing about in the next couple of weeks. We're writing up the first major paper now that really have the animals that are susceptible to develop COVID-19. We have measures now, what are called quantifiable measures, things that we can measure so that if we now give the animals a vaccine and then challenge them with the virus, we can really objectively determine whether the vaccine protects. And we know how to do this very well. We have experts in the Institute, virologists, people who've been doing contract science. So I think our contribution to Texas Biomed will be primarily in these fully vetted animal models systems, and we're also working with small animals at the Institute, which are also going to be good models to put through a lot of therapies and vaccines. We're going to play a major role in confirming whether there are lead therapies or vaccines going forward in conjunction with clinical trials. And I think that will be very important. There are other science projects going on at the medical school and at UTSA, as well as Southwest Research Institute, and in the private sector, Broadbridge Global, and others, who are participating in various aspects of science, whether it be new drug discovery, new drugs that may make it through the pipeline, clinical studies with currently approved therapies like remdesivir, or plasma therapy, antibody therapy, which is going on at Broadbridge Global. So I think collectively we have a large role to play. And the best news, and I always like to say it this way, is that we're working together to utilize each other's talents and to synergize so we move more quickly.
When will we know how long recovered COVID-19 patients will have immunity? That's one of the many things that are going on out there.
Right, so these are going to take longer longitudinal studies where we really learn more about what is, we make a lot of different kind of antibodies, and we have to find out exactly which ones are the best ones, and there's science coming along in that regard. We have to learn about when the antibodies are made, and only through these studies over time will we ultimately learn about the duration, the durability of those viruses, and that's a key question with regard to the length of time that we can protect, that an individual is protected either from natural COVID-19 infection or from any vaccine we administer. That's an absolute key question, and we don't have the answer to that yet.
Does it seem like that's on the same timeline with the vaccine?
I think that, it'll come through some of the clinical trial studies where we'll be learning more and more, but those studies will continue. There are a number of blood tests, the so-called antibody tests, that are, it's almost a cottage industry of tests that are being vetted, calibrated. Some we're hearing about have what are called false positive and false negatives with them. So there's not really a lead one yet that we can truly believe in. But I think those studies will allow us to evaluate over time the nature of those antibodies and how long they last. So I think the studies will continue. And the real question is, where are we at in the fall and next spring with regard to COVID-19? And at that point, do we have therapies, and how far along is that vaccine? Ultimately, those are the interventions that are going to enable us to go back to normal lives, as we like to talk about it.
Right. Next question. Can sunlight kill the virus?
So there's a little bit, there's some evidence that UV light can kill COVID-19. We were actually involved in testing a machine of a local company, Xenex, in which it's a very high frequency pulsating type of a UV light. So there is some evidence that UV light has an effect, but I would say even besides the UV light, by being outside, outside also has, if it's windy, if you're 6 feet apart, it's very unlikely we're going to transmit the virus in an outdoor activity anyway.
Yeah.
So there's some evidence for that.
And the final question from our viewers: can the virus be spread through air conditioning units?
There's not really a lot of evidence for it, and I would say it's a theoretical risk. But this is mostly a droplet transmission, where close proximity in a closed environment is really human to human is the most effective way to transmit. It can last for some period of time on surfaces, and so there's certainly hand washing and hygiene measures need to stay in place. But it's not what I would call a primary transmission route.
Yeah. Dr. Larry Schlesinger from the Texas Biomedical Research Institute right here in San Antonio. I can't say that enough. This is research being done right here in San Antonio. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.